The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello, and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, everyone.
Well, here we are, back behind the mics in the studio for yet another episode.
We are here.
The show must go on.
Yes. Hey, we welcomed the first day of spring with a snowstorm.
Yay.
I know.
Wasn't that nice?
Any indication of how our spring is measuring up.
Well, 2026 has been one hell of a year so far.
I know, it's been kind of crappy.
I don't care if it snows out for the next month.
I know.
It's nice. I don't have to look outside, see nice weather, and people enjoying it. Everybody can sit inside and be miserable like me. Little update for all of you. Well, I went off my antivirals because my rash was going away.
Yes.
And then, one day I woke up, feeling much better, went in to make a coffee, bent over, and sneezed or coughed, and, well, my back went out.
Yes.
Woohoo! Which, the next day, they think the stress of it triggered yet another rash.
A brand new one.
Yeah, so I get to go back on antivirals for another 7 days.
Yes.
I'm such a lucky boy. So much to look forward to. But you know what has been great? Since you've kind of went into the guest bedroom and so you could get a good night's sleep without me bothering you all night.
Or getting contagious. I mean, you are contagious. You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm sure they probably do out there also. Or maybe they don't. It's just, she's just blabbering on.
I didn't want your scabies, as you keep saying you have, and I have to keep correcting you.
Well, I would say me misrepresenting my shingles for scabies is because I've had little sleep.
Right.
I've been a little bit, in a brain fog.
Right.
But the cool thing is, since you're in the other bedroom, because you need a good night's sleep in order to go to work the next day, I have the whole bedroom to myself.
I know.
So I have been listening to Ghost with Art Bell like I used to back in the day. And I've been marathoning it every night. And it's been wonderful.
I know, you've been telling me. Well, sort of. Giving me little snippets about some of the shows that you've been listening to. About giants.
That was Richard Serrett.
Oh.
But Art Bell, with all the Ghost, I think I've listened from 91 on to 2006 or so. That's a lot of episodes to go through.
That is.
And they've been fantastic because they're almost 3 hours apiece. It's been quite wonderful. I miss Art Bell so much. There's no one like him. I don't think there'll ever be anybody else like him again.
Yeah. Well, while you've been listening to Art Bell, I've been sharing a room with Mr. Chonkers. And last night was the first night so far where his chewing and his wheel running was quite audible. Well, he was having a grand old time, but I was trying to sleep.
He has a silent wheel, but his toenails are pretty long.
Click, 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 click,
That's
click.
all you hear. I don't think you can trim a hamster's toenails.
You want to try?
Not me.
Let's add that to your list of...
He's your hamster. It's for you to do.
He's our hamster. I haven't seen him in months. I didn't see him. I just heard him.
That's pretty much all that happens. You hear him more than you see him.
Yeah.
Such a lovely pet. Although he's cute as all hell.
Most expensive pet you'll never see.
Yeah. Well, I guess we need to get into tonight's stories.
Yeah. So, before I get started with my story, I have a trigger warning that I want to share. And we don't generally do trigger warnings, but I just want to mention that some of the language that I'm going to be using to describe mental health and physical health issues is going to be rather archaic and narrow-minded, but I'm using those descriptions because I want everyone to understand how people were spoken about in the past. And second, I'm going to be focusing in part on both mental and physical abuse. So just please be aware that some of the things I'm going to be talking about could be potentially upsetting to some of you. And secondly, this is the first time this has ever happened. I had really strong déjà vu the entire time that I was working on my story this week. So, for months before we even recorded our very first episode, every single time we would think of an episode topic or we'd come across a potential topic, I'd start a new Google Doc on it with just the topic as the title and a list of web addresses in the document. And we probably have, 30 or 40 of them saved in our podcast folder?
Right, all topics that we've covered, pretty much.
No, these are ones that we haven't covered yet.
Oh, the ideas.
Yes.
What we want to cover.
Yes. So when I started researching and writing up this story for this week, I kept feeling like I had told it before. A lot of it sounded so familiar that I actually went back through our episode spreadsheet. That's the spreadsheet of the topics we've actually covered and, what's the word?
Done episodes on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I went through that spreadsheet twice to make sure that we hadn't covered this place before, and it's not on the list. And then I thought maybe we had watched a Kindred Spirits episode where Amy and Adam had gone to this place, but we looked the other night and we couldn't find an episode on it, even though Google said that there was one.
Right.
But we couldn't find one. So I don't know why I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd covered Peoria State Hospital before.
Well, we've talked about it between ourselves many times, so it may have seemed as though we had covered it in an episode. And I think what we did was we purposely stayed away from a lot of the well-known asylums and places like that because they have been beaten to death. Everybody's done them over and over, and we didn't want to do the same also.
Unless we had something new to add.
Right.
Something different.
But we have been covering them and putting our spin on them and delving deeper into it if it's possible.
Right. And I also thought there was a very strong possibility that, we've covered almost 400 different topics at this point.
Yeah.
Episode 204, we've covered a lot. So I was like, well, it's possible we've covered it before, but I don't think so.
So what are you trying to say? That we haven't covered it before, but that tonight you're going to be covering it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
There's the Cliff Note version, people.
Are you saying I'm wordy?
I think everybody's going to step out and get a drink and a cigarette now and come back and listen to you.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the story of a young woman. She was just 23 years old, and her name was Rhoda Derry. The year was 1856, And Rhoda, by all accounts, was apparently a happy and healthy young woman. The Quincy Weekly Herald reported on November 30th, 1906, that, quote, she was a very beautiful girl before she became insane, end quote. Now, why the papers were even writing articles about Rhoda in the early 1900s, I have no idea. But they did, and it wasn't just one or two, it was several. As far as I can figure out, Rhoda had fallen in love with a man named Charles Fenix, but for whatever reason, Charles's mother refused to let him marry her. And according to PeoriaMagazine.com, the newspapers claimed that Charles's mother went so far as to put a curse on Rhoda. They said over and over that witchcraft was involved, and that Rhoda said things like, quote, she had spotted Satan lurking in physical form, something like a wild beast, which she believed was the Old Scratch. Later, while visiting a sister, Derry said she could see Mrs. Fenix in the corner, and that she believed that the old woman would torment her for as long as she lived, and that her pleasure was forever done, end quote. The newspapers said things like she was once a raving beauty, but now she was a raving maniac. Or that her own mother believed in witches and used to shoot at them while they flew around inside their house. One headline even stated that, quote, witches stole Rhodey's reason. The poor girl was the headliner for months, and the papers didn't seem to care one bit about how their ridiculous articles affected her or her family. At that time, there was the Illinois State Hospital for the Insane in Jacksonville, and Rhoda's father felt that he had no choice but to bring her there. Allegedly, once Rhoda was committed, she would tear at her own clothes and tell anyone who would listen that Mrs. Fenix was coming for her. Despite tying her down with ropes and locking her door, the orderlies would find Rhoda walking freely out in the hospital lawn every single morning. When they asked her how she had gotten outside, she'd say that Mrs. Fenix let her out. Now, keep in mind, this was all being reported, for whatever reason, in the newspapers, and we have no way of knowing just how much of it they were completely making up. State law at that time said that if patients weren't, quote, cured within 2 years, that they'd have to be released and sent back home to their families. Rhoda was sent back home. Another 2 years passed, and as her condition worsened, her family felt they had no choice but to send her to the next place that might care for her, the poorhouse. This was around 1860. It was around the year 1900 when Dr. George Zeller paid a visit to the poorhouse and met Rhoda. By this time, after decades of receiving barbaric treatment, including complete neglect, Rhoda was still tearing at her own clothes, but also eating anything she could get her hands on, which was difficult since she had spent years inside a Utica crib. A Utica crib, which got its name due to its popularity in asylums in Utica, New York, is essentially a coffin-sized wooden box with open slatted sides. An adult patient was forced inside and the lid was closed on them. Another way to picture it is to think of a baby's crib, only about the length and width of a coffin. Think of an adult being forced to cram inside of it, and then picture a lid being closed down on top of them as well. Rhoda Derry spent decades inside of one for hours and hours every day. Dr. Zeller commented later in his autobiography that Rhoda lay on a bed of straw inside the crib that was changed periodically by other inhabitants of the poorhouse. Eventually, the straw was replaced by some sort of wooden box that served as a type of potty seat, so that when Rhoda relieved herself, the waste would drop into the box instead of directly onto the floor. This, however, did not cut down on the number of mice and rats attracted to her crib. She certainly couldn't defend herself in any way, since her muscles had atrophied and she was in a permanent fetal position. She could no longer see or speak. The treatment of Rhoda Derry was more than enough to convince Dr. Zeller that something had to be done for people in Illinois suffering from mental health issues. And so, in 1902, when Dr. Zeller was named the director of the brand new Illinois Asylum for the Incurable Insane, being built in Bartonville, he knew he wanted to change things. He started by changing the name of the hospital to the Illinois General Hospital because he didn't believe in the word incurable. And in 1904, he made arrangements to have Rhoda Derry come there. She was 70 years old and hadn't slept in an actual bed for 44 years. Dr. Zeller believed in fresh air and a non-restrictive environment, which meant his hospital had no barred windows, no locked doors, no sedatives, no restraints, and a holistic approach. Rhoda was cared for at the Illinois General Hospital, now known as the Peoria State Hospital, until 1906, when she passed away at the age of 72. Dr. Zeller made Peoria State Hospital a place of kindness, compassion, and empathy. According to the official Peoria State Hospital website, despite many of his peers thinking his methods were foolish, his hospital, which was actually a complex of 63 buildings, by the way, was considered number one in its treatment of illnesses. It was also the number one nursing program in the country for 34 of its 36 years in operation. The 63 buildings included a tuberculosis ward, cure cottages, dorms for the full-time staff, a store, a bakery, and a kitchen. He insisted that his employees maintain an 8-hour workday and that an emphasis always be placed on empathetic care. But there were still over 4,000 patients who passed away at Peoria State Hospital and were buried in one of the 4 cemeteries on the hospital grounds. Most of the graves are marked with just a number. For example, Rhoda Derry was number 217, until her descendants replaced the numbered stone with an actual marker. Another noteworthy patient was Emily Belcher, the last surviving descendant of the legendary explorer Sir Francis Drake. Today, the Peoria State Hospital Museum celebrates Dr. Zeller's work and is intent on sharing his legacy. even though only 12 of the original structures are still standing. The cemeteries are still filled with numbered stones. But surprisingly, it was Dr. Zeller, of all people, who shared the first ghost story about the hospital. The funny thing is, it was his ghost story that brought on my déjà vu, as if I had told the story before. But according to bumpinthenight.com, Dr. Zeller wrote the following in his autobiography. Quote, "When I took charge of the Peoria State Hospital for the Insane, I recognized that the disposal of the dead must have attention. We buried only the bodies of the friendless and unclaimed. The remains of the well-to-do were handled by friends and relatives. The burial corps consisted of a reliable employee and a half-dozen male residents. Of these, the most unusual was a bookbinder. He had been working in a printing house when his mental aberration manifested itself in the loss of coherent speech. Later, as he could not express himself in writing, the clerk of the court gave as his name that of his calling. Thus, he was committed to us as a bookbinder. Soon, he became known as Old Book. He developed an interesting trait at the first funeral in which he participated. At the end of the ceremonies, Old Book removed his cap, began to wipe his eyes, and finally gave vent to loud lamentations. When at each succeeding burial his feelings overcame him, it was realized that Old Book was possessed of a mania that manifested itself in an uncontrollable grief. Old Book never varied the routine of his mourning. He would step back, spade in hand, in an attitude of waiting. First his left and then his right sleeve would be raised to wipe away a furtive tear. As the coffin began to descend into the grave, he would walk over and lean against the big elm that stood in the center of the lot, and give vent to sobs that convulsed his frame and which were heard by the entire assemblage. The tree was known as the graveyard elm and was recognized as one of the finest of its species. It came Old Book's turn to be carried to his last resting place. The hour was set for noon on a beautiful October day. More than 100 uniformed nurses gathered, in addition to the staff and several hundred patients. I officiated. The coffin rested upon 2 crossbeams over the open grave, and 4 sturdy men stood by ready to man the ropes by which it was lowered. Just as the choir finished Rock of Ages, the men grasped the ropes, stooped forward, and with a powerful muscular effort prepared to lift the coffin in order to permit the removal of the crossbeams and allow it to gently descend into the grave. At a given signal, they heaved away the ropes. In the next instant, all 4 lay on their backs. For the coffin, instead of offering resistance, bounded into the air like an empty eggshell. The nurses shrieked. Half of them ran away, while the other half came over to the grave. In the midst of this commotion, a wailing voice was heard, and every eye turned toward the graveyard elm whence it emanated. We stood, transfixed, for there was Old Book, weeping and moaning in earnest. No one moved or spoke, and a paralytic fear came over us. Finally, I summoned the helpers to remove the coffin lid. Their hands trembled as they loosened the screws. I nerved myself up to peer into the coffin, but just as they lifted the lid, the wailing sound ceased, and we gazed upon the calm features of our old mourner. Everybody was invited to identify the remains. After casting a glance at the corpse, every eye wandered over to the graveyard elm. The tree stood there in all its stateliness. The apparition had vanished, and the funeral was completed. A few days later, the graveyard elm began to wither, and over the next year, it died. Later, after the dead limbs had dropped, workmen tried to remove the huge trunk, but they stopped after hearing at the first cut of the axe an agonized, despairing cry of pain emanating from the heart of the tree. I suggested that they burn it, which they tried. However, as soon as the flames got going around the tree's base, the men quickly extinguished them, saying to me later that the roar of the flames had become a sobbing, crying sound, as often heard at funerals. The old elm, by the way, is no longer there today. It was hit by lightning and it toppled in the 1970s. Dr. Zeller's mission survived for several decades after his death in 1938, but unfortunately, by the 1970s, overcrowding and understaffing made Peoria State Hospital a rather dangerous and lonely place, and that was no more apparent than in 1972. According to the state-led investigative report that I read from the Illinois State Digital Archives, the hospital was staffed by mostly inexperienced younger people, and the hospital superintendent tended to favor certain wards over others within his own buildings, often neglecting certain wards, even when problems were brought to his attention. Also, at this point, almost all of the patients were being given sedatives and tranquilizers to ease the burden on the inexperienced staff. In addition, the Bartonville police complained that they were rarely called about incidents in the hospital, or at best, they were called hours and hours after an incident occurred. This disastrous combination resulted in 3 deaths in just 1972 alone. Jerome Spence was a 43-year-old special needs man who had lived there since 1958, and his mother had repeatedly expressed concerns for his safety after he had been assaulted 20 times over his 14-year residency. He was beaten to death by 2 other patients in their 20s who had assaulted him before. No one from the hospital contacted the police until 8 hours after Jerome was found. Bernard Rowe had epilepsy, and he had an IQ of 87. One day, while in line in the cafeteria, he accidentally cut in front of fellow patient Robert Loftus. Enraged, Loftus picked up a wooden chair and struck Bernard in the head. As Bernard lay on the floor, Loftus got his food, went over to a table, sat down, and calmly ate his meal. 29-year-old James Logan suffered from untreated spiral meningitis, which resulted in a brain abscess. The state of Illinois conducted an investigation aided by the Bartonville police and concluded that Peoria State Hospital was a far cry from what it used to be. The hospital was shut down in 1973. Today, the Peoria State Hospital Museum, as I'd said, does a great job at highlighting the good work that Dr. Zeller did there, and they have tried their best to keep the remaining buildings from being demolished. But financially, it's a huge struggle, and they offer all kinds of tours to try and keep the place afloat. There are private historical tours in groups no bigger than 5 that consist of a private tour guide taking the group through several of the remaining buildings. But there are also both public and private paranormal tours. According to jahernandez.com, there are all kinds of reports of the Peoria State Hospital grounds being haunted. From disembodied voices to the sound of heavy boots walking down empty hallways. There is a lady in a white dress that often appears in windows, and the ghost of a little girl who likes to play with dolls. There are reports of shadow people chasing people up the stairs from the Bowen Building's basement. Now, sadly, the Bowen Building was the most recent to be demolished. I have to say that I totally understand why the Peoria State Hospital relies on ghost hunts to make money, and I also understand why they are celebrating Dr. Zeller. But to me, the Peoria State Hospital is less about hauntings and more about getting the history right. And I think all of it should be told, the good and especially the bad, because sweeping things under the rug is not fair to the people who suffered through it. Their stories need to be told just as much as Dr. Zeller's. Rhoda Derry didn't deserve what she got, and neither did Jerome, Bernard, or James. And there are 4,000 souls buried there who deserve their names back. The Peoria State Hospital Museum's mission statement says that it's their goal to educate people about the work of Dr. Zeller, as they should. But if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there is this paragraph. We at the Peoria State Hospital Museum work tirelessly to keep PSH history not only alive, but more importantly, accurate. We believe that those who worked, lived, and spent their lives here, both as patients and as staff, deserve to be remembered with respect. The same respect they showed their patients, the grounds, and the mission of Dr. Zeller. Hopefully, they are able to continue to do so. I did some searching, and I couldn't find any articles about any groups trying to put some names to the thousands of numbered gravestones in the 4 cemeteries. But I did find this on the Find a Grave website. Since the closing of the state hospital, all records have been and remain closed. The last body laid to rest was in 1973. The state of Illinois decreed that historians and genealogists cannot record the names, birth, and death dates of any grave. Over 1,500 are identified, and those are recorded. But many of the remaining graves bear only a number, and the state of Illinois will not release information even under a court order to do so. If that's true, then it's no wonder that the Peoria State Hospital is saying that they want their history to be accurate.
Well, that's weird. What the hell's going on with Illinois where they don't want to release these names?
I don't know. But I mean, it's a losing battle. If the museum is trying so hard to share accurate history, but they can't get any, they can't get any of the stuff to do that.
I don't understand why. What do they have to lose from it?
Well, I mean, yeah, if you go back to 1906 all the way up to, I don't know what year it would be. I mean, maybe it has something to do with living relatives. I could see the patients from the 1960s and the 70s, maybe they have living relatives that don't want that information to be known. But if you go back to 1906, I don't know.
It's a head scratcher.
I know. And unfortunately, like I said, there's only 11 buildings left. So even doing ghost hunts in order to raise money to, continue their mission is difficult because they have to keep demolishing buildings because they're just not safe.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've seen it with a lot of places. Some of them were massive.
Yeah.
I mean, so many buildings. There is no way to really take care of them all.
No.
I mean, it would take millions and millions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how does one do that these days?
Right. And I think, too, the reason that there's so many people buried there, 4,000, is because it was a tuberculosis hospital as well.
Right.
So, anyway, Peoria State Hospital.
We'll return with my story after this quick break.
Hey, did you know? It's easy to imagine musicians becoming tired of playing their most famous songs over and over and over. But did you know that sometimes even authors start to hate their most famous characters? In fact, in the case of Louisa May Alcott, she never liked Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy from the very beginning. Although she was already an established writer, by the time she wrote Little Women, she wrote it entirely because she needed the money, and her publisher told her she'd better write a girl story. Alcott wrote in her journal, quote, "So I plod away, though I don't enjoy this sort of thing. Never liked girls or knew many." By the time she'd finished the third book in the series, she wrote, quote, "It is a strong temptation to close the present tale with an earthquake, which should engulf Plumfield and its environs so deeply in the bowels of the earth that no one could ever find it. But as that somewhat melodramatic conclusion might shock my gentle readers, I will refrain." End quote. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we are back from the break, and I've got a strange mystery for all you fellow wanderers tonight. Although the exact date is unknown, on either November 1st, 1922, or October 25th of 1924, the people of Margate, South Africa, witnessed something very strange. Like Farmer Hugh Ballance, who told newspapers that he was standing on the shore looking out to the sea when he saw an epic sea battle between two killer whales and some sort of creature. As the killer whales repeatedly attacked this creature, Ballance and the other witnesses watched as it reared a good 20 feet out of the water and used its elephant-like trunk to slap the whales away. This creature was all white and appeared to be some sort of giant polar bear, but with a trunk like an elephant and the tail of a humongous lobster. This creature battled the killer whales for 3 full hours before the whales finally gave up and swam off. The creature, whatever it was, floated lifelessly on the surface. According to Carl Schuker, the British zoologist and cryptozoologist, in his blog article, Behold Trunko, the amazing creature then washed ashore in Margate. The locals didn't know what to make of this incredible creature, which was said to be 5 feet high, 10 feet wide, and 47 feet long, with a 10-foot tail that was said to resemble a lobster's. Its other end, where its head should be, ended in a long trunk, just like an elephant's. It was 5 feet long and 14 inches wide, and ended in what looked like a pig's snout. But even more puzzling was the 8-inch long white fur that covered its entire body. Ballant said it looked exactly like a polar bear's fur. And despite the exhausting and epic battle it had fought and lost, there wasn't a single sign of injury, no wounds and no blood. Remarkably, the Margate sea serpent, which Schuker later nicknamed Trunko decades later, lay on the beach for 10 whole days. Now, despite a lot of press coverage, not a single scientist ever came out to look at it. And as far as we know, only 4 photographs of Trunko exist, and they were taken by reporter A.C. Jones of Johannesburg, who later published them in the Rand Daily Mail and Wide World magazine, but not until July of 1925. Now, the one photo that can be found easily online is very interesting. It shows a man leaning over at the waist with his back to the camera in complete shadow, so you can only really see his silhouette. He's reaching down with his right hand to touch what I assume is Trunko's snout, which is a lot wider and bigger than the man's hand. As for Trunko himself, well, I can see the vague shape of a elephant's trunk and head leading to a sort of whale body. But other than that, all I see is something quite large that looks like it's been covered in the same stuff that's used to make popcorn ceilings.
Your least favorite type of ceilings.
Yeah, I'm not fond of them. It's an odd image for sure, because there's really nothing about it that says this was a living creature. And yet, the witnesses swore that they saw a very real living creature out in the sea, fighting off those killer whales. But back to the beach. In either 1922 or 1924, as Trunko started to decompose and stink really bad, the Margate locals figured they better try to move it back into the sea. They used as many as 32 oxen at the same time and could only get it just to the edge of the water. That apparently was good enough, because on the 11th day, Trunko was gone. They assumed that the tide had done the rest of the work and carried the cryptid back out to sea. The story of Trunko has persisted for 100 years because of the eyewitness accounts, and their insistence in the papers that they saw some sort of white-furred creature battling killer whales for 3 hours. They saw it leap out of the ocean, and its trunk smacking and swiping at the whales in defense. But today, 100 years later, we still aren't 100% sure what Trunko was. The real sticking point seems to be the reports of Trunko's white fur that made him look like a polar bear. Because of their fur, polar bears only spend part of their life in the water and the rest on land, which means logically that Trunko would have had to have spent part of his life on land also. Except for the fact that Trunko didn't have any appendages. Would he pull himself around by his elephant's trunk and use his lobster-like tail for leverage? And if he was a mammal, well, he should have had visible wounds when he washed ashore.
He sounds like quite the cryptid. The polar bear with the elephant, pig, snout, trunk, and the lobster tail.
He sounds like something. Another possibility, according to Carl Schuker, is that Trunko was actually a known marine animal, like a shark, that was already dead in the water. Sometimes sharks suffer from the pseudo-plesiosaur effect, which means that as they decompose in the water, their connective tissue pokes through and looks like hair or fur. Except for the fact that a dead shark certainly can't battle killer whales. Which brings us to the next possibility, that Trunko wasn't alive during the battle either. That what the Margate locals saw was really a couple of killer whales playing with an already dead shark. Now, perhaps the killer whales managed to flip the carcass into the air themselves, only giving the impression that Trunko had done it himself. Killer whales are known to do that to seals, so maybe they somehow got the tremendous Trunko into the air also. This theory could also explain why Trunko appeared to be headless. Maybe he did have a head, but it was lost in the water because he had already decomposed so badly by the time the whales found him. Another theory is that Trunko was simply a globster. British biologist Ivan T. Sanderson coined the term globster in 1962 to describe badly decomposed animals that have no visible eyes, no defined head, and no apparent bone structure. When people see globsters on a beach, they often assume that they are some sort of gigantic octopus. But after further analysis, they often turn out to be decomposed sharks, whales, or giant squid. In the case of whales, their blubber oozes out and makes their shape totally unrecognizable. Several sea monsters and beasts have turned out to be globsters, although the older the case, the harder it is to be 100% certain. The Stronsay beast of 1808 is generally thought to have been a basking shark globster. The New Zealand globster of 1965 turned out to be a whale, as did the Bermuda blobs of 1988 and 1997. Most recently, the Montauk monster of 2008 turned out to be a partially decomposed raccoon.
Oh. Oh, poor thing.
I'm still picturing these two whales kind of bouncing this thing between their snouts.
I know.
Like a beach ball.
I know, flipping it around and making it airborne and
to think they do that with seals.
Yeah.
And when you think of seals, you kind of picture them on a drum, bouncing a ball back and forth between themselves.
Is that what you think of when you think of seals?
That's the image I always get.
When you think of elephants, do you always think of Dumbo flying around?
Kind of. So, if Trunko was once a whale, it's possible that as it decomposed, its backbone and skull detached and sank, leaving behind just a sack of blubber. If any of its ribs are still left inside of the sack and have any stuff still attached to them, they can resemble tentacles. But Trunko didn't have any tentacles. He had a trunk. So, was he just some sort of unique globster that didn't follow the usual patterns of decomposition? Well, I decided to take a look at the types of sharks and whales that live off the coast of Margate, South Africa. As for common sharks, they have ragged tooth, tiger sharks, bull sharks, hammerheads, and copper sharks. Bull sharks, ragged tooth sharks, and copper sharks, on average, are 8 to 9 feet long. Hammerheads and tiger sharks can grow up to as long as 20 feet long. Now, with that said, I don't know if a 20-foot shark could become a 47-foot-long lobster. As for whales, there are humpbacks and southern right whales. A humpback whale makes the most logical sense to me, as they can grow as long as 60 feet. And when you take into consideration a whale's tail, it could resemble a massive lobster's tail, which is what some of the Margate locals said Trunko had. And whale globsters typically lose their fins, which would account for why Trunko appeared to be one long, smooth creature. And they turn white, which would account for Trunko's color. There was one globster that washed up on shore in the Philippines in February of 2017 that looked like some sort of humongous shaggy white dog. In fact, from the back, it looked exactly like a gigantic white cocker spaniel taking a nap in the water. But it was really a decomposed whale. But going back to that 1924 photograph of Trunko, it's interesting because it doesn't quite look like all the globster photos that you can find online. It doesn't look shaggy or furry. So, it's still, like I said, a bit of a mystery. If only one scientist would have traveled to Margate 100 years ago to check it out, we might actually have an answer for what Trunko was.
But alas, we do not.
No, and we'll put the photograph up on our Facebook page.
Yes.
And I highly encourage you to go look at it and see what you think. At times, it does look like that popcorn ceiling material. And then in other times, it kind of does look like it could be white fur, or perhaps it's just the water going over it that gives it that illusion. But it's definitely strange looking.
Yeah, but when you compare it to like that other one you were just talking about, the one from the Philippines in 2017, right. I mean, that literally looks like a furry, shaggy dog. A massive, humongous dog.
Right.
But a dog. It doesn't look the same. But I don't know. I mean, the Trunko photo is also black and white.
Kind of looks like Clifford, the big red dog. But white.
The one in the Philippines? Yeah, it does.
I mean, it's pretty big.
Yeah. And it looks furry.
Yeah.
Yeah. From that angle, I mean, there might be other pictures from different angles where it looks totally different. But there's only the one existing photo of Trunko, you said, right? Online?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all we have to go on.
That's it. Well, I don't know. I can't imagine walking along the shoreline and seeing these two whales bouncing this whatever between itself, really. I mean, or it fighting with these whales.
Right. A 47-foot long creature that they're just flipping around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And, well, the weight of it, too. I mean, you've got 32 oxen trying to pull this thing back into the water, but 2 killer whales were able to flip it around out in the water, like flip it up into the air. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, they're whales, and dragging it across sand might be a bit more difficult.
That's true. Well, it's true.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
It's nothing that we can even try to replicate.
Let's not try.
We could take a shaggy dog and bring it down to the beach and have some sturgeon, bounce it back and forth.
Oh,
I know, that's sick.
That's terrible. What's wrong with you?
Well, I don't know what's wrong with me. Nobody knows what's wrong with me. But I assume there's something.
I would think probably, maybe.
I don't know. I have a vivid imagination, I guess you could say. And trying to figure this out for myself.
Right. But you also have like a scientific theory, let's test it out kind of imagination that goes to places sometimes that
it shouldn't go.
Right.
Well, I don't think I'm the only one like me out there.
No, probably not. You're not unique.
No. And I'm not locked up for it. So, hey.
Although you must feel like it lately. Having not left the house in like a month.
It has been a while.
Yes.
I think when I go outside, I'm going to have to wear shades because the sun's just going to blind me. I'm going to be like a vampire. Oh, no. The sun. It's burning me.
What is that bright light? You'll have to go make sure it's overcast that day when you venture out.
Right. I'll bring an umbrella with me. Pull it down.
A little parasol.
Yeah. Well, if you want to know more about tonight's stories? Beth.
You can always check our sources for our show notes. No, that's reverse. You can always check our show notes for our sources.
Yeah, I'm not the only one with problems.
Well, this is no secret.
Join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.